It's kind of a weird day. I get attached to stuff and I keep it forever. I'm not a hoarder, but I got my moments. I am selling my first log splitter, guys. And I've gotten this out of the barn. And when I was pulling this out of the barn, I had to move my super splitter out of the way. And I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to set these out here. And maybe we can talk about log splitters. And of course, here at Ohio Woodburner, we have a business element to what we talk about, because I think there is a splitter-based business with all of these type of splitters that you see here. And so maybe we can talk about it. This is about 10 years old. This is a Troy-built 27-ton. It is, I think, made in Cleveland, Ohio. That MTD company, they make Cub Cadet, Troy-built MTD. And this is, when I think of a log splitter, this is what I think of, you know, and probably it's the same for a lot of you guys and gals too. I've heaved my last mull. The first thing you think of is I'm going to get me a log splitter, and it's probably one of these. And why not? These are reliable, they're trustworthy, they will last forever, and you can pass these down from generation to generation. They are the iconic, highly portable log splitter here in the United States. These are light enough where you can move them around the yard by hand, or you can pull them with a lawnmower. If you're working at a friend's place down the road, you can hitch it to your truck and pull it down the road, and they just work. They're a great machine. The thing that just about everyone who ever buys one of these realizes right away is they're slow, man. I really do think you could probably do your taxes for the year while you're splitting wood with one of these. That's how slow they are. I think the part of these splitters that is so enticing for people is most of them can go vertical like this, which prevents you from having to pick the big heavy log up off the ground, and you can split them in quarters to where at least you can pick them up. The thing though that you quickly learn with one of these is that it is probably more difficult on you physically to split wood like this than it is vertical, because you're like squatted down. It just kills your knees and your legs. You just can't seem to get that log, if it's a big round, you know, to lay right on this, because it's going to fall off to the side, and then you can't get the knife to get into it with a good bite. But that is, I think, the big draw for one of these splitters, is when you start getting into wood and it's just big and you're just tired of splitting it with a maul. One of these things make a lot of sense. I'll be honest, I didn't really get a lot of use out of this, because when I first bought this, it was because I had bought a big chainsaw. Before then, I never really even split wood. I just, if it was big enough to fit in my furnace, it went in. When I got a bigger saw, I was able to cut larger wood, and I needed to split it. And swinging a maul isn't for me. So we bought this, and I think this was $1,500 or $1,700, and it works really good. The only thing was I broke off these self-tapping screws on both sides of this cradle. I had always thought about welding these on instead of drilling these out, but I found the best thing for me to do was not to do anything. So they're both just like this now. The reason I didn't weld it on was there was a guy on eBay that made cradles, and they kind of would be held onto the side by their own weight, and it was just like a workbench that you can, you know, split a log, put the big piece over so you can whittle on the other piece. But I just, you know, by the time I got to that, I then went to the super splitter. And serious, once I went to this thing, this went in the barn, and I never really used it again. Other things that I liked about this, I like that the lever was at a good height, but the working height is just a little bit low for me. But I have seen some people that use these exclusively. They've built like a platform, and they that makes the working height a little higher, or they'll have a production table. And I had dropped, logs, and man, you do weird things with this, and these big goofy shaped logs, and you're trying to split them, and they would fall on top of the engine, and it kind of bent my linkage the one time, and it's always been like that still. But for the most part, it's a hard working machine. It's very reliable. And then came along this guy, and this is when everything changed for me. And that is where I just thought this is the way log splitters were, until I ran into this. And having one of these guys means you will never ever look at one of these hydraulic splitters ever again. They're just too slow. They're hydraulic, and you got to have that engine at high RPM. You don't have to have this on high RPM. It's quieter. This works with kinetic energy. It's got two big flywheels here that spin, and it drives out this ram. And where the hydraulic splitter has a 14-second cycle time, which means it takes 14 seconds for the ram to come out and go all the way back in, the super splitter has a 2-second cycle time. So these cost more, where I would say, and look, I've been out of the market here for a while. I don't know what these guys are selling for now, but I would imagine you could probably double it for one of these. These, I paid $3,000 for this, and I've had this for a while too. And it was twice as much as this, but I'm serious, guys. These are 10 times more productive. And if you are serious about getting into production and selling firewood, and if you haven't bought your splitter yet, I can understand why you would go with one of these. And maybe that would be the prudent way to begin, where you can get something to where you can take in bigger wood, make it into firewood. But the sooner you get into a kinetic splitter, I think the better off you'll be. And it might hurt, and I know spending money hurts and all, but if you have it, I think you would be better off just to buy one of these at the very start and forget about and jump this step. And every machine has its strengths and its opportunities, and this one certainly, its strength is speed. And man, this thing just flies. It'll split wood faster than you can move. Its limitations, and I would argue though they're not as big as what people make them out to be, is that they would struggle with a larger log. Obviously you got to be able to pick the log up and set it on here, and if you do have some twisted knots, it's going to struggle with it. But it is just so much faster than all the other log splitters that my position is, who cares? If that's the case, then just don't split those tough logs. There was a time in the evolution of Ohio wood burner where the super splitter touched every single piece of wood that we sold, and that was even when I bought my first firewood processor, because that processor was just making too big of wood, and I needed it to be smaller, and I resplit every single piece of wood with this super splitter. That is how productive this thing is. And I would not be where I am right now if not for a machine like this. And while I could stand here and talk all day long about the glory of the kinetic splitter, it too had its limitations. And I found myself in the way that I'm making firewood, because I have a firewood processor now, is the first thing you learn with a processor is that you don't throw away your chainsaw. You're still going to need it. You still get bigger logs that won't fit through it, and you got to split them. The challenge that I had was the logs that I needed split were getting too big for me to pick up. And I'm in my 50s now, guys, and I'm not getting any younger. So I turned my sights to a professional grade, commercial grade log splitter, and here you go. This is the Eastonmade Axis. And this is a vertical splitter. It may look a little different than what most people are used to seeing with the horizontal splitters, because the horizontal splitter, like my Troy built, now they'll make a much faster commercial grade, but not like heavy duty like an Eastonmade. They're out there, and it is not until you get into a commercial grade splitter like an Eastonmade, an Axis, is when everything changes, because here you have the best of both worlds. You can make a finished product of value-added firewood the moment that the knife touches the wood. You don't have any resplitting to do. And what makes it even better, guys, is that this machine will pick the log up for you. And it has a nice workbench too to lay all your junk on when you're not when you're not making firewood with it. I don't know where the magic number is with the number of cords that you produce, but I got to it with the super splitter to where I still have a big use for the super splitter. But the Eastonmade Axis has filled that void, and now there's really not much anything I can't do when it comes to firewood that comes onto my land. I can produce all of it into sellable, value-added firewood. If you are serious about getting into firewood and becoming a profitable business, I think that you can expect one of these things or something similar to it showing up on your land at some time. But I don't think that this is the right machine for you just to start with because of a few things. Number one, they're expensive, they're big and heavy, they're loud, but man, are they productive. And if you are using one of these in a residential neighborhood, I don't know if this would be the way to go, guys, because this thing will wake up your neighbors. And it's really big to where you just can't take this to the firewood. You have to bring the firewood to it. This thing is even too big and heavy to hitch up to your lawnmower or to your four-wheeler, well, maybe most four-wheelers, and pull it around. It's just too big and heavy. You got to have a truck or a tractor or a skid steer to move this thing around. If you look at your other Eastonmade splitters or your other brands that are out there, when you think of the horizontal ones, you know, let's now talk about the kind of firewood that you're looking to produce. If you're looking to sell big chunk wood, I think any type of log splitter would be your thing, especially the horizontal ones because they're faster. But if you're looking to sell value-added firewood where you can get a higher return on fewer sticks of firewood, you go with a vertical type splitter like this or even a super splitter until you can afford to get into something like this. Here is how I can explain how tough the Eastonmade Axis is. When a person would come and ask to borrow anything off of me, now that this is my livelihood, you know, I would look at it, for instance, like the super splitter, I'd never loan this out to anyone. It is kind of like a Ferrari, you know? It's a great machine, but man, you put it in the wrong person's hands and they can tear it up. You with me? I think the only machine that I would ever lend out is the Eastonmade Axis because it's indestructible. You cannot hurt this machine. That's how strong and big and tough this is. From the log lift to the very end of the conveyor. It is that big and strong. And at least, you know, if you are spending some big bucks on a splitter like this, I think you can, you know, relax and know at least this will be the last one you'll ever have to buy because it's going to last forever. I have referred to my Troy-built splitter in the past, but I've never shown it working. I thought, let's go ahead and get it fired up, and I'll show you guys how this thing works, all right? And that was a lot of fun. And the super splitter is slightly faster, guys. Last but not least, the commercial grade Eastonmade axis. This is a big oak. I would never be able to pick this up myself. We'll let the machine do the work for us. Big, loud, but man, is it productive. That was a huge oak log. There is no way I could have ever lifted that up onto the super splitter. And I'm serious, even putting this horizontal, that's a lot of work, man. It wears you out splitting wood like that. I think ultimately your choice of splitter comes down to what you want. You know, it's your gig, so go for it. I think what you should pay attention to though is what kind of wood you want to sell. If you want to sell big chunks of wood with minimal labor, but you're not going to get as much money for it, and that's good with you, then probably a log splitter like this is fine. If you want to get smaller splits and spend more time resplitting, you can't beat a super splitter until your volume says that you got to go bigger. that's when the Eastonmade axis, guys, is the ultimate. The fact that I have that shows the limitations of the super splitter. There's really no limitations with this. I guess there would be a limitation for this, but I have never seen it. I think this thing is awesome. I hope that you found this helpful, and I'm glad that you got to see my Troy built here before it heads on down the road. I have to take my trailer to the same location, so I'm going to get this log splitter up in this trailer somehow. That might be a video for another day. All right, guys, I hope everyone has a great day.